This is Hoosier Ag Today, and I'm Andy Eubank with an update on Indiana corn and soybean crops as we inch toward harvest season. Bill Mullen with Seed Consultants points out how crops are showing the stress of a very wet early growing season in fields located in Carroll County, Indiana.
Good afternoon, Andy. My name is Bill Mullen. I'm with Seed Consultants, and we're out here today, Monday afternoon, in the cornfield. We're between south of Delphi, Indiana, and north of Rossville, Indiana. And today we're out here in this cornfield trying to look at a couple things. Is that looking at the ear size, and if there's an effect by some nitrogen deficiency, how that ears develop compared to plants where we had adequate amounts of nitrogen, even considering all the rain. All right. Some of the reasons with the rain is going to be where some of these fields compacted. With all the rain we've had, those ground pounding rains, it really did limit or so as how good our roots developed going down. Most of the time with the conditions we had, most of the root development was going more out on both sides of the kernel and not going to the depth like we normally like to see in that. All right, so I'm out here today just to see if we have compaction, nitrogen deficiency, and how it's going to affect these ears or for our yield in our customers' fields out here in Indiana, which has been very evident this year. As you can see here, what I just dug up, yes, you know, we did have roots, some roots that did go down, okay, but they've been basically, it's almost like layered compaction or so in here. It's been a problem, and I dug down probably about 4 inches or so. I'm breaking apart now, just trying to see where some of these other roots are at. And the soil is dry right now, so that's good. I wish this was the first part of July, more so than being the middle of August and that. So you can see here, it's basically our roots have developed out. We're having some nodal roots that have developed, but not to the degree that I like to see in that. The rainfall, as much rain as we had, did have an impact on our root development net. But the plant still was able to produce roots. They're going down, pick up some nutrients, as well as hold the plant in the ground. I went down this row here, probably 100, 150 feet. I found an area where we didn't have the water issues like what I've seen in this area here. As you can see right now, it is breaking apart. A little bit more development of our roots. A lot more roots compared to the other one. The roots did go down a lot deeper than that. A root diameter is a lot better as well than that. It almost appears like to me on our nodal roots here, where it almost had a little bit of rootworm feeding. Not much, but you can see how some of these roots are starting to throw off smaller roots off of it, and that suggests a little bit of a feeding net. But our nodal root development is a lot better. Our roots went a lot deeper. We're not seeing the nitrogen deficiency on this plant as we've seen on the other plant. This plant here was where it came out of, where it had a lot of water, where it had a lot more of the nitrogen deficiency. These are going to be issues because the roots haven't really developed enough that we saw the damage or the lack of helping the ear to develop. My big concern is root systems like this, which are very poor in helping that plant to truly stay in the ground. If we have a wet fall, a lot of winds or so, there's a chance we're going to see a lot more lodging, plants going down by harvest time. This plant here, as you can see, was in an area where we didn't have all the water. There are plants like this, percentage-wise, a smaller percentage because of all the water we've had up here early on. But as you can see, our nodal roots have really developed nice. Our roots have gone down, and the bottom line is it's a lot better ear development than that. This plant here was the one where the roots have been hurt. We have nitrogen deficiency. I husked back the ear, and this is where we've got. We have really an issue here with tip back, as you can see, as well as part of the ear right in this area didn't fertilize, okay, as far as the pollen coming down the silks to fertilize the ovules right here in that. We're seeing a little damage from insects as well in that. But as you all can see here, this ear here is more, it's not as far as long as that the other one is. You know, we're pretty much still in milk stage. And right now I've split the ear back just to see how many rows we have. With this here, with a good plant, with the good roots in that, I counted approximately 34 kernels per row. And the other thing is I picked up an additional 2 rows. I have 16 rows on this ear at 34 kernels versus 14 rows over here with 22 kernels. More yield, we have more rows than that. And the big thing about it is just showing to everybody out there the issues that we have, be it nitrogen deficiency or root issues and that, okay? It's one here that is going to affect our yield. It's also going to affect standability prior to harvest time and that. We need to keep that in mind. In this field, there's a lot more of these areas percentage-wise that have been hurt by the water, been hurt by the lack of nitrogen to go ahead and fill the ear in that. Probably 60%. However, in the other 40% of this field where there wasn't the water issue, a lot better root development, we have a lot better ear development. We're going to have more yield per acre now. This ear over here is that its tip back is very small. It might be a ½ inch or so. So it's ½ inch here. And so that to me is that we had better pollination too with this plant. And I've always felt that healthier plants are going to do better under stress, more so than plants that have been hurt by some of the growing conditions after planting all the way up to pollination time. Just to see if we do have any issues or so out here with any potential stalk rots in that, okay? And more or less, it's pretty healthy still. This white, the white pith of our stalk in that, all right? As you can see, it isn't quite as developed in that, with the roots have been hurt. It is drying out here, down here to our first node, all right? Second node. And it's pretty much going up the plant. It's not like it's holding that moisture in the plant to keep it healthy from the ground up. Again, part of it's coming down to our root development the way it was in that. So, and there's some issues. The other thing we want to keep in mind is if we don't really have the good roots in that and the good healthy plants, and it's throwing an ear out there, you know, and if it pollinated real well, that plant's going to need that moisture. And if we're not getting the moisture from rains or so, you know, we're trying to get the water and move up these pathways up the plant in order to feed it if possible. But if we don't have the moisture, if we don't have that healthy pith inside here and that, you know, we're going to go ahead and cannibalize the stalk. And what that means basically is the moisture is being pulled out of our stalks here to go ahead and fill that ear out, all right? The problem with that is that we're weakening the integrity of this stalk and make it more vulnerable, especially at harvest time. Now, I'll go ahead and I look at these 2 plants here, and these are the plant that came out of our bigger ear, the one where we had the 2 more rows and more kernels in it. And with a better root development, you can see we got a lot healthier material. We have a lot better roots in that. And our stalk quality inside, it's still, you can tell there's moisture in here. So it's still a healthy plant, all right? The chances of this plant having an issue with stalk rots or so is not as great as what we have with this plant here now. So just something to keep in mind as we, prior to harvesting that we're looking at these smaller plants. We want to try to keep that ear as much as possible, but it's also where we might have to go and start shelling this corn a little bit earlier to go ahead and save the ears rather than not the plants falling down, and still, you know, keep our grain quality up there as well as best can be expected. This here is a 2-1 maturity. This here is a 2-4 maturity. And I'm going to count the number of pods on the best plant just to see, or on 2 plants get a range. But as you can see through here, that we did have early on good nodule production on our roots in that. You know, nodules basically producing the nitrogen for the soybean plant. This year on some of our variable soils though, because it was so wet, the roots weren't growing, we weren't really producing the nodules, the nitrogen that the plant needed at the time, and stayed yellow for that long period of time. When I look over here on this fuller season one now, the nodules here, and there's nodules, but they don't seem to be quite as many nodules on the fuller season bean as compared to our earlier bean. And every variety is going to be different under the conditions. The customer told me he planted our 2-1 bean is 9213s on the west side, planting to the east. And then over there, you could tell there's a lot healthier beans, a lot greener beans over there, and that's a competitor's 2.4 maturity. The customer likes to plant early beans. It helps him out for harvest time. He likes to get his beans harvested, all done before he goes to corn. Now, I went through here and I just did a simple pod count, and I understand there are some water issues out here like we've seen in the cornfield earlier, but taking the plants for 9213s, we had a pod range of 47 to 51 amongst the plants that I pulled in that. All right. As you can see here, though, and we'd like to see a lot more of these, is this bean right there. There is a 4-bean pod. So we know that the genetics are out there. Wish we had some better growing conditions. We have a lot of 3-bean pods, but there is 1-bean pod on the 9213s and that. Now we come down here to the competitor's 2.4 maturity soybean, which showing about the same height in that, but it's still carrying its color to it more so than the 9213s. The range here on the pod from these two plants that pulled was 37 to 47 pod count. And I looked through here for where a 4-bean pod is, and there it is right there. So this variety here also is showing a 4-bean pod, and the common factor is both of the varieties have 1 pod that's 4 beans, but pretty much everything else is 3-bean pods in that. The other thing to say is that what makes it good is that we're getting the clusters out here. We need to get these clusters filled out. These are an important part as far as finishing out the soybean, as far as our yield. So we get these beans up here, like to see them. We're seeing the clusters anywhere from 4 to 7, 8 pods in that, and pod knot, coming down the stalk in that. So on our 9213s, what we're looking at here is that we don't have the top cluster like what's on the competitor, but we got more beans, more pods on where the nodes are at, more so than the other one. Getting a lot of 4 pods to our clusters here and going all the way down. So you really have a little bit more beans per plant, but the plant is putting a little bit more yield out here for the number of pods, but we're getting the nodes closer together, and that's the whole key to it, is try to get these nodes closer together and get those pods forming there, because we know the genetics out there for yield. We know the genetics out there to throw out 4-bean pods. Mother Nature has a lot to do as far as making this work. We had some height out here with this variety, but now it's starting to lean over and starting to go down in that. Any more winds or so, that there's only so much strength in these stalks, and over time as we get closer to harvest time, we're going to see some of these varieties start to lean, some of these varieties start to lodge in that. But for the most part, I don't feel that it's going to go ahead and be a harvesting issue in that. Walking some of these fields in Indiana here in the past 2 weeks, I do happen to see a little bit more of the stink bugs. And stink bugs basically will zero right into that pod and cause us some pod and stem blight, and when we have poor grain quality in that, and it'll just shrivel up the beans, and so we'll have less bushels per acre in that. But for the most part, that's the only insect I've seen. There is, when I looked out through there's a wet spot out there, and those plants basically just died due to phytophthora in there. I haven't seen any sudden death syndrome out here, and that's good. But for the most part, considering as much rain as what we've had this springtime, you know, I haven't done my estimated yield, but I'm looking somewhere around the 35, maybe 45 bushel acres. We get into some issues where we haven't had the water. So, you know, as far as beans go right now, the big thing is that we make sure that they're standing real good, and when they're ready to go, we want to make sure and get them harvested. But they're keeping their health. They went ahead and they potted real nice all the way up. But again, we just don't have the number of pods forming on the plants this summer, this fall, because of all the water issues that we had, and also where it delayed the plants. As I pointed out before, we just didn't have good nodules being produced. We really need to have those good nodules being produced early on that plant, so that plant has a healthier start in that. So, you know, I don't think there'll be much variability in yields out here in our soybean fields as we're going to see in our corn fields. So just something there to keep in mind as we get closer to harvest. Keep an eye on it, and when the crop is ready to take off, for the soybeans, you know, we need to get it off. And as far as corn, likewise, you know, really start trying to maybe, once it's ready, get that moisture level 24, 28%. And people are dryers, you know, with the issues we're having with a lot of those root issues from the compaction, nitrogen deficiency, you know, there's still some yield out there, but we need to make sure and get it harvested so that it doesn't fall on the ground, we lose it. So that's pretty much what I've seen this day, this nice day out here on the 24th of August, and thanks for your time.
Thanks to Bill Mullen, Director of Agronomic Services at Seed Consultants Incorporated. I'm Andy Eubank. This is Hoosier Ag Today, Indiana's Farm Network.